The audience at the Ed Sullivan Theater erupted in applause as Stephen Colbert walked onto the stage, his signature smirk hinting at an explosive segment ahead. The Late Show had always been a hub of political satire, but tonight was different. A scandal was brewing, and at the center of it stood Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in American history, now serving under President Donald J. Trump in his shocking return to the Oval Office in 2025. Colbert adjusted his tie and leaned over his desk, a glimmer of mischief in his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. You know, I thought we had seen everything in politics. But apparently, the circus is still in town and the ringmaster is back. That's right, folks, Trump's White House is giving us enough drama to last a lifetime." The audience chuckled, some cheering, others booing at the mention of the controversial president. But tonight, we have an exclusive, a bombshell, a moment that might just shake the very foundations of Washington. We have received reports, unverified, of course, but we're in the entertainment business, so why let facts get in the way, that White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt has been involved in something rather shady. And, my friends, we're going to get to the bottom of it. The crowd murmured, intrigued. Colbert grinned. To set the stage, let's bring out the woman of the hour. Please welcome Karoline Leavitt. The studio doors swung open and Karoline strode in confidently, dressed in a sharp red blazer that exuded both power and defiance. She flashed a composed smile, waving at the audience before taking her seat. "Karoline, welcome to the show." "Thank you, Stephen. Always a pleasure to step into the lion's den," she replied with a smirk. Colbert leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. "Let's cut to the chase. Reports have surfaced alleging that you were involved in an unauthorized leak of classified White House documents. The claim is that you orchestrated a scheme to pass sensitive information to certain media outlets sympathetic to your administration. What do you say to that?" The crowd gasped. The allegation was explosive. Karoline's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. "That's quite an accusation, Stephen. Tell me, where did you get this information from?" Colbert chuckled. "Oh, you know how Washington works." A little birdie whispered in my ear. "A well-placed source within the administration told us there was a breach, and guess whose name came up?" Karoline crossed her legs, her expression unreadable. "Stephen, let me make something crystal clear. The idea that I would leak classified information is absurd. And if you think this claim holds any weight, I challenge you, bring out your so-called source. Because from where I'm sitting, this sounds like another desperate attempt by the mainstream media to manufacture controversy where none exists." The audience stirred. Some murmured their agreement, others remained skeptical. Colbert raised an eyebrow. "So you're saying there's nothing to this?" Karoline leaned forward. "I'm saying your well-placed source is about as reliable as the guy who promised CNN that the 2020 election would be overturned." The crowd laughed, but Colbert wasn't backing down. "Well, Karoline, that's a bold denial. But let's say, hypothetically, if there was a leak, wouldn't it benefit your administration to control the narrative before the real details come out?" Karoline's expression darkened. "Let's flip this around, Stephen. If there was any evidence, if there was even a shred of truth to what you're saying, why hasn't the Department of Justice launched an investigation? Where's the FBI raid? Where's the indictment? Oh, wait, I forgot. That only happens to Trump supporters." The audience reacted with a mix of gasps and cheers. Colbert smirked but remained calm. "So you're saying this is a witch hunt?" "No, I'm saying this is a pathetic attempt at a smear campaign." "But nice try," she shot back. The energy in the room crackled with tension. Colbert wasn't done. And neither was she. Colbert leaned back in his chair, twirling a pen between his fingers. He loved a good debate, especially when it involved someone from the Trump administration. The audience was hooked, sensing the battle that was about to unfold. "All right, Karoline," he said, flashing a grin. "You say this is a smear campaign. But let's talk facts." Karoline interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, I'd love to, Stephen. But will we actually talk facts, or is this going to be another feelings over facts segment?" The audience chuckled, but Colbert pressed on. Sources claim that a memo detailing classified policy discussions was leaked to a conservative news outlet just days before President Trump made a major announcement. The timing was suspicious, to say the least. And, funny enough, the person responsible for handling those memos? You. Karoline's smile didn't waver. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if amused. "Stephen, do you know how many people have access to those memos? We're talking about a communications team, policy advisors, cabinet officials, and interns who fetch coffee. But sure, let's ignore all that and pretend I personally handed a folder to some journalist in a trench coat behind a parking lot." The crowd laughed, but Colbert wasn't giving up. "Come on, Karoline. You can't deny that your administration has a history of bending the rules when it comes to the media. And your network has a history of fabricating narratives to fit your agenda, she shot back. Shall we go down memory lane? Russia collusion? The fine people hoax? The walls are closing in saga that never ends. The audience reacted with a mix of gasps and claps. Colbert, ever the showman, feigned an exaggerated wince. Oof. That stung. But let's stay focused. If you're denying these allegations, are you willing to say under oath that you had no involvement in this so-called leak? Karoline leaned forward, locking eyes with him. Stephen, I'd testify right now if it meant exposing the hypocrisy of this witch hunt. Because that's exactly what this is, another attempt to discredit a successful administration that's actually putting America first again. Some in the crowd clapped while others booed. The tension in the room was palpable. Colbert, sensing he needed to regain control, smirked and leaned closer. All right, Karoline. Let's say for a moment you're telling the truth. If this leak didn't come from you, then who did it? Without hesitation, Karoline's expression turned steely. Oh, that's the question, isn't it? But here's the fun part, your so-called sources conveniently never have names. It's always an anonymous official, a high-ranking insider, a former Trump aide. You know what that tells me? That this story is as real as your show's objectivity. The audience erupted into a mix of laughter and groans. Colbert chuckled but kept his composure. Okay, but let's be real. If the media was making this up, why is this leak being investigated? Why are people inside the White House reportedly concerned? Karoline sighed dramatically. Stephen, people in the White House are always concerned about something. Half of DC spends their time panicking over nonsense while the rest of us actually work. Colbert laughed. So you're saying this is nothing? Just another Tuesday in Trump's White House. Karoline smirked. I'm saying if I actually leaked classified documents, you wouldn't be cracking jokes about it, I'd be in cuffs. But since the only crime here is bad journalism, I think I'll sleep just fine tonight. The audience roared with a mix of reactions. Colbert held up his hands. All right. You've got your talking points ready. But let's move on to the bigger picture. Do you honestly believe this administration is operating transparently? Because a lot of people on both sides aren't convinced. Karoline's face turned serious. Transparency, Stephen? Where was the transparency when intelligence agencies spied on Trump's campaign in 2016? Where was the transparency when the Hunter Biden laptop story was buried? The only reason you're suddenly interested in leaks is because it fits your narrative. The audience gasped. Colbert, for the first time that night, seemed momentarily caught off guard. But then he grinned. Karoline, you sure know how to throw punches. But let me ask you, if this is all fake news, why does it bother you so much? She leaned back, crossing her arms. It doesn't bother me, Stephen. It entertains me. Because the more the media plays these games, the more everyday Americans realize they've been lied to for years. So by all means, keep pushing nonsense. You're only helping us. The crowd erupted into a frenzy. Colbert adjusted his tie, tapping his fingers on his desk as the audience murmured in reaction to Karoline's fiery response. He wasn't used to being put on the defensive, especially by a member of the Trump administration. But he wasn't backing down. All right, Karoline, he said, flashing a tight smile. I'll admit, you've got your rehearsed counterattacks down to an art. But let's pivot for a second. If we put this so-called leak aside, there's still the issue of how your administration deals with the press. Many say you stonewall, deflect, and outright refuse to answer legitimate questions. Karoline let out a soft chuckle. Legitimate questions? You mean like the ones where reporters start with, why is Trump destroying America? Or, when will the dictatorship end? The audience laughed, some clapping, others booing. Come on, Stephen. Let's be honest. The White House press corps isn't interested in journalism anymore. It's performance art. Half the time, the questions are just long-winded rants with a question mark at the end. And then they act shocked when I don't play along. Colbert smirked. So what you're saying is, you only answer questions you like? No, she shot back. I answer real questions, not preloaded accusations disguised as journalism. Big difference. The crowd reacted with a mix of cheers and groans. Colbert decided to push further. All right then, let's talk about transparency. Your administration recently restricted certain media outlets from White House press briefings. Isn't that a little authoritarian? Karoline shook her head. No, Stephen. What's authoritarian is when big tech and government agencies work together to silence stories that made one political party look bad. We're simply refusing to reward outlets that spent years lying about our administration. Colbert feigned shock. Wow. So now the White House gets to decide who's a real journalist. If journalists are just activists with press badges, then yeah, maybe it's time we stop pretending they're neutral, she quipped. The audience roared, some in support, others in outrage. Colbert raised his hands. Okay. So basically, you're saying the media is corrupt, and your team is just trying to set the record straight. Karoline leaned in, voice firm. No, Stephen. I'm saying the media isn't interested in facts. They're interested in narratives. And the only reason they're mad at us is because we refuse to play along. Colbert nodded slowly, letting the tension hang for a moment. Well, Karoline, I have to admit, you're good at what you do. You dodge, you pivot, and you throw some pretty impressive counterpunches. But let me ask you this. When history looks back on this administration, what do you think it'll say? Karoline didn't hesitate. I think history will say that President Trump put America first, that we exposed the lies of the establishment, and that despite the attacks, we fought for the people. Colbert raised an eyebrow. And if history says the opposite? Karoline smirked. Then I guess history will have been written by people like you. The audience erupted in cheers, boos, and laughter. Colbert, knowing he had just been outmaneuvered, let out a dramatic sigh. All right, folks. Give it up for Karoline Leavitt. She might not answer the tough questions, but she sure knows how to fight back. Karoline stood, smiling confidently as the audience reacted, knowing full well that she had turned the interview into a showdown for the ages. As the show cut to a commercial break, Karoline Leavitt stood up from her seat, adjusting her red blazer. Stephen Colbert, ever the showman, leaned over and whispered, "That was quite a show, Karoline. You sure you don't want a late-night gig?" She smirked. "No thanks, Stephen. I prefer a job where I don't have to make things up for ratings." Colbert chuckled, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. Karoline had held her ground, refusing to be cornered, and now the internet was about to explode. As she walked off stage, her phone buzzed relentlessly. Trending #1 on X, formerly Twitter, #Karoline vs. Colbert. The battle lines had been drawn. The media firestorm. By the time Karoline got into the black SUV waiting outside the studio, the fallout was already in full swing. Fox News had declared her performance a masterclass in taking down media bias. CNN called it a disgraceful display of deflection and conspiracy theories. The New York Times headline read, "Karoline Leavitt spins and dodges, but questions remain." Meanwhile, conservative outlets were praising her as Trump's toughest fighter yet. Inside the car, Karoline scrolled through the reactions. The left-wing accounts were outraged while the right-wing base was energized. Ben Shapiro, "Karoline Leavitt just dismantled Colbert on live TV. The media can't handle the truth." Rachel Maddow, "That was not a press secretary. That was a propaganda machine in high heels." Donald Trump Jr., "Epic. Karoline just crushed the fake news like a boss. Best press secretary ever." And then there was President Trump himself. Donald J. Trump, "Karoline destroys fake news, Colbert. The radical left can't handle the truth." "Great job, Karoline." She smirked. The chaos was predictable. But then came the twist. The leak investigation takes a turn. Just as she was about to put her phone away, a breaking news alert popped up on her screen. Anonymous White House official claims there is an ongoing investigation into the leak. Karoline's eyes narrowed. She tapped on the article. A senior administration official speaking on the condition of anonymity has confirmed that an internal review is underway regarding a suspected leak of classified documents. While no formal accusations have been made, sources suggest that the White House is taking the matter seriously. Karoline clenched her jaw. "Convenient timing," she muttered. She knew exactly what was happening. The deep state loyalists still embedded in Washington were trying to keep Trump's White House under siege. First, they leaked something to the media. Then, when she denied it, they claimed there was an investigation to cast doubt on her words. Classic DC playbook. She called her assistant. "Get me in the Oval first thing tomorrow. We need to get ahead of this before the media runs wild." The fight was far from over. If they thought she was going to back down, they had another thing coming. "Karoline, does the president support your statements? Are you calling for an end to anonymous sources? Is the White House going to take legal action against these claims?" She held up a hand. "The president and this administration will always fight back against dishonest attacks. The American people deserve the truth, not manufactured scandals. Thank you. And with that, she walked off the stage, leaving the media scrambling to make sense of what had just happened. Final blow to the narrative. Hours later, just as Karoline had predicted, the so-called investigation fell apart. The FBI released a statement confirming that no formal probe had been launched into White House leaks. One of the anonymous sources was exposed as a former Obama-era official with no actual access to the administration. And as for Colbert, his team issued a carefully worded clarification. The segment with Karoline Leavitt was intended as a discussion and should not be interpreted as a formal accusation. Translation? They had nothing. The damage was done, but not to Karoline. She had survived the media's attack, turned the tables, and walked away stronger than ever. As she sat in her office later that evening, her phone buzzed with a text from President Trump. "Great job. They never saw it coming. Let's keep winning." Karoline smiled. She had won this round. But in Washington, the battle never truly ended.